Right, welcome everybody. We still have students coming into the session, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We're a few minutes after 7 o'clock. This is UNT Percussion's Zoom Clinic series, 10 questions plus with Steve Gadd. We're so excited and humbled to have Steve with us tonight to speak about his career. My name is Mark Ford. I'm the coordinator of percussion at North Texas. Steve Gadd needs very few introductions. He is a drum set player that has influenced all of us. Whether you're a drummer and you play drum set on the side, or you're a professional drummer, Steve's music and his approach to drumming has changed all of the ways that we hear the drum set, the way that we perceive the drum set. And so we're just so excited to be part of this session tonight with you, Steve. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you.
So we've asked all the students to submit questions for our guest artist. And so the faculty selected 10 questions, and we've asked each student whose questions were selected to speak to Steve tonight. First one is going to be Jared Grimm, who's a senior BA major in percussion. Jared, are you with us?
I am. Mr. Gadd, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Jared, before you get started, Jared, if everyone could mute themselves except for Jared and Steve right now, that would be great. Okay, Jared, go for it.
So, Mr. Gadd, as I've read in several interviews, you said that you grew up listening to a lot of different music, and that was mainly influenced by your family. Could you share with us some of your favorite records or drummers that had a huge impact on you growing up?
Yeah, let me start out by saying, so when I was about 3 years old, my mom and dad and my brother, we were living with my dad's parents and my dad's brother. And my dad's brother had been a drummer in high school and then had been in the military. And so he was out of the service and had to march in a parade with the veterans. And he was playing I saw a red, a snare drum on a chair in the parlor. That's the first drum I saw. And I fell in love with the drums, from that day on. Now, they tell me that I was banging on things, and my uncle, who I said was a drummer in high school, showed me how to hold a pair of sticks and got me a little round piece of wood. And he had a little round piece of wood and a pair of sticks, and we'd play and listen to John Philip Sousa marches and play along. And this was before television, so, at the end of the day when everyone got back from work, we'd all sit in the parlor and play music together. So the John Philip Sousa marches were some of the first things I played along with. And then my uncle, saw that I was, staying interested in the drums. So he started, buying different kinds of albums for me to listen to. And we started, I remember listening to Tommy Dorsey, Harry James, Jimmy Dorsey, Glenn Miller. I listened to the Dukes of Dixieland. And then as I got a little bit older, he started getting me more into jazz, like with Max Roach and Art Blakey, Philly Joe Jones, Jimmy Cobb, and then eventually Elvin and Tony. But my first loves were Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson. And some of the albums that I listened to Skin Deep. That was a Louis Bellson thing. There was an album that I listened a lot to, was Krupa versus Rich. And it had Oscar Peterson, Ray Brown, Dizzy Gillespie, Roy Eldridge, Illinois Jaquette, and another guy. But I mean, I used to listen to those albums a lot. There was an Ella Fitzgerald album live in London where she did Mac the Knife, and it had a great groove, and so I had my favorite things that I'd listen to over growing up, and and then I listened to radio too. So I was listening to Elvis Presley, all the things that started to get popular back in the 50s. So Jack McDuff, Rock Candy, that was another album that I listened to a lot. And some of the songs had places where the groove really locked in, and I would wait for those for everything to lock in. It just it felt so good. Anyway, Ray Charles, I listen to today. But growing up, those were the records I listened to, and then as I got older, I started getting into Edgar Winters. There was an album, White Trash, that I like. Message to the People, Ray Charles. There was a Stan Getz album with Oscar Peterson, Ray Brown, and a guitar player. No drums. So that's one that I still play along with. But I try. I thought about what I listened to growing up, and that's sort of what I came up with.
Thank you so much for sharing. An honor.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Jared. Next is a master's candidate in jazz studies here, Steve. His name is Josh Calef.
Mm-hmm.
Josh?
Mr. Gadd, it's really, really great to meet you and hear you, and it's an honor to have you, so thank you.
Nice to be here.
So my question is related to the previous one. I'm curious about playing along with recordings. So early in your career, were there recordings that you would specifically play along with? Are there any specific albums? And then I think you mentioned that there's some drummerless tracks that you still kind of do this with. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I played along with the marches. They were 78 records, and I just stood next to the speaker and played along on a pad. But like other albums, I really wasn't able to play along with them. I had a set of drums in the living room, but like I didn't have a stereo. It was hi-fi, and I couldn't really get it loud enough to play along with it. But I mean, I would listen to stuff, and then practice after, and but not a lot of playing along with albums when I got a little bit older, just because it was before headphones. It was really before the stereo things, and I really couldn't get the music louder than myself. But now, like I play along with a lot of different things, just nothing in particular, but just to try and lock in with the grooves, not on drums, but on a pad or on a table. Since the pandemic, I haven't had this much time off in a long time, and so I gravitated towards playing on a pad or on a table with these sticks with rubber tips. I had them located in different rooms of the house, and so I just got into playing a lot of rudiments since this thing has been going on. And it doesn't feel like practice, but it feels like fun. But I mean, I could, like an hour or two will go by, and I'll have been, shedding for that much time. And I haven't, it's been years since I've had the time to do that. On the road, my practice thing isn't, I warm up before the shows, but normally the shows themselves are the thing that keep me in shape. And I just try to warm up before. I don't really get into practicing creatively when I'm on the road because there isn't the time. But what's happened with the pandemic is like just playing on a table. It's opened up some new stickings and new ways to play rudiments that I've been writing the stuff down. I'm anxious to share them. And I just started doing it and had the time to not have to worry about. A lot of times when I had time off before the pandemic, I'd have to learn music for the next thing. You know what I mean? It's like the time off wasn't just time off. There were things to prepare for. So now with the pandemic, there's really nothing except for when we get together like this, there's not a lot of work. So there was a lot of time on my hands, and I just ended up going back to the rudiments and practicing traditional grip, and it's been, it's been fun. I've been having a ball, I don't know if it's stuff that I'll take to the kit, but it's stuff that tricks, it's stuff that works your chops, and there are little 2-bar phrases that I come up with to warm up with, and so I've been having fun, and I'm anxious to share that with you guys when I get the book done.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Well,
That sounds awesome, Steve. You mentioned you might have a pad close by. Do you want to show us what you're warming up with?
Well, yeah, let me show you something. I mean, the pad is a little bit lower. It's a piece of wood. So the first thing I do before is just so if I had, like that would be the first thing I do to just get the blood going, to, loosen my wrists up, and not to do it fast. It's just about warming up. And then I came, so there's certain rudiments, especially ones with flams, you really work help you develop your chops and work the hands. And in a way where you're doing both hands at the same time, but certain rudiments will work one hand more than the other. So you're doing things with both hands, but the rudiments will work one hand more than the other. So paradiddles, flam paradiddles. And what I do is I take the flam paradiddle and play it and then displace it. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. So, and then you take flam taps and a flam paradiddle. 1, 2, 3. And then you displace it. 1, 2, 3. So those are some of the things that I put in the book. There's different stickings that sound exactly like the flam paradiddle, and that's in there too. This is it's you start it with a flam tap. It's like I'll play 2 flam paradiddles and then I'll play 2 of the other ones. So the second one is like it's like a Swiss flamadiddle, I think that's what it's called. And then you would displace those. Those can be played faster than the paradiddle, the flam paradiddles. And then there's another sticking that sounds exactly like the flam paradiddle, and it's so what I discovered, is different stickings that play the same rudiments, and some of them are easier to play fast than others. But being able to go from one to the other, I think in the long run will help. You get them comfortable, and you can just like pick and choose where you want to stick them. When you really get to when you really get them under your chops. The other one that I was doing is flam random fuse. So. It's that you just place it on the and of 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, those were sort of like some of the things that I was coming up with. Also, there's different stickings for flam taps. So here's flam taps. And there's another, this one is one that works the left hand. Sounds like flam taps, but the left hand is really working a lot more than the right hand. So it's like. So you do that and displace them. I mean, it's just, when I got into this thing, it just opens up a whole, it opens up a whole other door. And I've been just, writing the stuff down and making notes of it. Maybe it's probably hard to really see the difference of the stickings on Zoom call. I don't know if you could Could you see the difference in the stickings?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so here's some other ones that work the hands, like 1, 2, 3. So that's sort of what's in the book. A lot of those there are little 2 or 4 bar patterns that I discovered while I was practicing, and they strengthen the hands. I think it's musical because they're in phrases. I think it's important to practice in phrases. And so it works that way. If you play them I think you have to do them with a metronome, especially when you get into displacing the rudiments. But it's just, I just keep discovering new stickings and stuff. Like, I mean, it was like I was a kid again, you know what I mean? It was, I forgot how much I loved the rudiments. You know, I was in drum corps and a time when I spent a lot of time not practicing but playing, because it wasn't practice, it was fun. You know, I would write parts for the corps and teach them to the guys, and they were all my friends. We hung out, practiced all day, taught the other guys the parts, and I, you know, I'm back into that head again, so you know, it's just been I've been learning some new things, and it's been great. There's and the displacing the rudiments. You know, all of the things that I do aren't necessarily things that I would take to the kid, but some of the stuff is. And even if you didn't do it exactly technically the way you did it rudimentally, some of the accents and some of the phrases, yeah, I think can be taken to the kit and used that way. What else? Oh, here's one. Let me put it back down again. So that's another one that I hadn't seen before. They just, you know, I wish that we were in person so I could see, you know, your reaction and what you felt, and if it made any sense. Does it make, I mean, do those things make any sense?
Yes, Steve, it looks great. We look forward to the book. I mean, really, it's awesome to see you, you know, working on rudiments, because those are some of the things that we really promote with our students, you know, to develop early on and to continue on, you know, in their technique. Want to go to, should we move to the next question now? Are you good for that, or? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump out a little bit out of order here, guys, and go with Jack Kloecker, who's a master's in percussion candidate here from Lincoln, Nebraska. Jack, do you have a question for Steve?
Yeah, hi, Mr. Gadd. It's an honor to have you here. This is great. I just want to ask you, so as part of the list of outstanding percussionists who have studied with John Beck, what are some of the biggest takeaways or advice that he gave you that still sticks with you today?
He was always encouraging, always getting me to try things that were out of my comfort zone, especially with classical percussion, because I feel like I'm a good snare drummer and, percussion in the orchestra, but when it comes to mallets and timpani, that's a whole other ballgame.
Steve,
but he was very, huh?
Steve, before you go much further, I just wanted you to know we invited John Beck. He's with us right now, and maybe you two guys could talk about it for a second. John, are you with us?
I am with you. Yes, big time. Good to see you all.
John, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Steve, and you're looking great.
Oh, thank you. Well, what I was saying was that you were always encouraging and always got me to do things that I would sort of, put the brakes on. And John would always encourage me to walk through whatever I was afraid of, and it always worked out. And he, I don't know, he helped me in so many ways. Like getting into the Army band, so I didn't have to go to Vietnam. He helped me when I first wanted to go to Eastman School of Music. My academic grades weren't very good, and so I couldn't get in the U of R Eastman, but I was able to get in Manhattan School of Music, and John helped me do all the auditions and get everything prepared. And then after 2 years in Manhattan, I was able to transfer back and go to Eastman. And then I studied with John, who had been my teacher before that. And Bill Street was still teaching, he was the professor. This was before John was the professor. He was playing timpani and teaching in the preparatory department. And so I went from the preparatory department, Manhattan School of Music, back to Eastman with John, and then he eventually became the percussion teacher for the whole school. And he got me to do a concerto program. He got me to play marimba things and timpani things, and my first response to everything that he wanted me to do was like, I wanted to put the brakes on, but he got me through it, and not only as a music educator and a percussion educator, but he helped me out when I was young, going through, just things as a kid. I got thrown out of grammar school, and I told John about it before my dad even knew about it. And he would talk me through all of these things, man. So he was like not only a teacher, but he was a friend and a big brother, and someone that I looked up to then, and I certainly continue to look up to him now.
Steve, could I just say something here?
No.
The more you learn, the better I got, because I would just watch you try these things. They'd work. Hey, so then I could get them. So you helped me as much as I helped you, and it's been a pleasure all of these years.
Oh, thank you, John. I appreciate that.
For those of you that aren't familiar with John Beck, John is, wow, John, you're a legendary percussionist and teacher from Eastman. So many amazing students went through your studio, and of course you're past president of PAS and have done so much for so many. Do you have a good story about when Steve was in school there? Something that you might share with us, an experience you guys had?
Oh, well, he always did things the right way. If it didn't do it right the first time, it became right the second time. Steve has the type of humor. It's sort of laid back. And one time, this is kind of a funny story. One of my students was from Niagara Falls, and his parents left town for a weekend, and so he invited his girlfriend to go with him to take over the house. And this became quite knowledgeable. And I can remember when the student then was confronted with all of this, Steve was there, and he looked at the student and just said, my, that was what you should have done, but I'm sure it was fun. So those are the things that Steve did. He was always, well, he and Chuck Mangione and all those other guys were here at the time. So when Steve sat down at the drum set and he played one note, we knew it was Steve was there, because it was just a sound, something he had within him. He was called Mr. Rhythm. It's just something that just lived within in him, and his interest in drum chords was really a big time for him. And he and his buddies used to get things together and play for me outside of the Eastman school type of thing, but the core things. I believe it was the Crusaders. I may be wrong with that, Steve, but you guys would play for me, and they say, "What do you think of it?" I say, "Well, that's great." So he was always one thing I like about Steve is that he's a humble person. He is who he is, but he's not letting you know who he is, at least verbally. He just sits down at the drums and he tells you who he is, and he doesn't have to say a word. And that's one nice thing about Stephen. And I also got to know the family, his mother and father and his uncle, and his son, the Duke studied with me then for 4 years during high school. And Duke is doing very well. And one time, I'll say this, Steve, I don't know if I told you this, but one time the Duke came to his lesson with me, and he looked at me and he says, "Mr. Beck." I said, "Yes, Duke." He says, "Do you think I should change my name?" And I said, after thinking about it, I said, "No, just stop trying to play like your dad and play like yourself." That was the best advice I could give him. And he's done very well for himself.
He's doing.
So anyway, I can't give you a specific thing. Steve could probably tell you more about funny things that happened than I could.
Well, John, it's so great that you could join us tonight. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule. I'm sorry I got to you a little late on the invitation, but I'm so happy you're here.
Well, I appreciate being asked, and I always like to hang out with Steve. He's my buddy.
Good to see you, John. Thanks for coming. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we'll go on to Will O'Rourke, who is a senior in jazz studies here at North Texas. Will, you have a question for Steve?
Yes, I do. Hello.
Hi, Will.
Hi, man. I can't even begin to tell you what an honor it is. I seriously love all your music and your career, especially all your stuff with James Taylor and Paul Simon. I've probably listened to the Simon and Garfunkel Live in Central Park album more times than I can count. Your work with Grady Tate on the album is just killer. Seriously, it embodies everything I want to do with my career when I graduate. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
Of course. So I'm curious, going off of that, working with Paul Simon and everyone. How do you work in the studio? Do you have any specific routines? This really applies to the periods of your life in LA when you were playing multiple sessions per day.
Yeah. Well, I would go in and say hello to whoever was there, and then I would go check the gear out to make sure everything was okay. And then The one thing that I think is important in terms of being a routine in the studio is that whatever music is going to be played, whatever music you're going to be a part of, before anyone starts talking about it, I think it's important for the artist or the producer to play the song or play a demo, because if you start talking about it before you've heard it, you're going to create more problems. So that's the one thing that I try to keep consistent when I'm in the studio, is I want to hear the piece before we talk about it. Other than that, it just you just sort of go with the flow. Every session's a little bit different. So you try to understand the pace of every session's got a certain kind of pace that's happening. Some is more, they want to get it done quick. Others, like, you want to take their time with it. And, so I try to line up with that, so I'm not getting ahead, or I'm not, falling behind. And then pretty much, rehearsing it and knowing when you've got it ready to at least start taking it, you know what I mean? So that's pretty much the routine. It's listening to the music first, checking the gear out, and then, getting the feel of the pace of the thing, getting to know people that you might not have met before. You know what I mean? There's like, you got to get to know everybody, and there's like a certain period of getting to, like saying hello and getting comfortable. I try to go in without any premonitions, or I just try to go in clear so that I can respond to whatever's going down and not have to erase what I had in my head going in there so I could listen to something else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Steve, our next question is coming from Jordan Proffer. He's our 1 o'clock lab band drummer this semester. He's from North Richland Hills here in Texas, and he's a junior. Jordan, you with us?
Yes. Hey, Mr. Gadd, hope you're doing well.
Good, how are you doing?
Good. So my question, actually, you kind of answered it a little bit at the end of that one before. Can you talk more about not really having an idea of what you want to play going into a recording session? Because my question was going to be, how do you ensure when you're given the music beforehand, before a recording session, how do you make sure that you're ready for that? So if you could just talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking of not having them going in without the music.
Oh, okay.
When you have the music ahead of time, it gets if they send a demo and the demo sounds good, sometimes they say they like what was on the demo, right? So you have to go in and try to replace that. Other times they say they don't want to use, they want something different from the demo. So if they tell me they want to keep it like the demo, then I would spend time trying to learn what the part was, before I got in the studio. So at least if they wanted it, I could play it. You know what I mean? If not, if they wanted something different, I would, I would just listen to the thing, and not try to figure out the whole part ahead of time, but just knowing sort of the form of the music, and then trying to let the producer or the artist guide me when I was there, you know, as to how they wanted me to play the part. You know, I mean, I would go in and play some time or something, but nothing specific, unless the bass line was so strong that you had to like sort of lock the bass drum in with the bass line, you know. So there isn't any one way to answer that question, because it's always different. But I think that unless you had to learn what was on the piece beforehand, if you just listen to the piece form-wise and then go in and play the music, play it how you feel it, and let them hear that, and then you work together on you know, dialing in the part more specifically.
I have another. Sorry.
Yeah, did that help though? Because it's different every time. You know, sometimes they send things, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't want the demo, and all those situations make me have to do it a little differently.
Yeah, that helps. I guess I was also curious, like, if you know that you're going to have a solo, would you ever have any preconceived idea of like what you want to do, or would you never even like practice?
No. No, I wouldn't have a preconceived idea. I would just sort of go in and let it, you know, sort of see how it felt. Let the track happen, so I know what's happening before the solo, because that would affect how good the track feels before the solo is going to affect what I play. Do you know what I mean? Not figuring out beforehand. Well, what's going to determine what I play is how the thing feels right before the solo. So the better it feels, the more inspired I'll be.
Awesome.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jordan. Okay, and kind of another, still staying with the recording, is a question from Jonah Leonard from Prosper. He's a sophomore. Jonah, you with us?
Yes. Hey, Mr. Gadd, how are you?
Good, Jonah. How are you?
Good. So my question was, when you come up with unique grooves like the one in Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover and Late in the Evening, what does that process kind of look like of like crafting those grooves, and how do you know it's the right thing for those songs?
Well, let's take 50 Ways now. So, I mean, I was doing a lot of sessions, and between takes, I would, instead of going into the control room and listening, I would stay in the drum booth and just sort of, you know, practice different things that I had been practicing. And during the 50 Ways session, during that period, I had been practicing things with the hi-hat, playing the hi-hat with the foot, and then hitting it with the hand after. I was trying to do those kind of syncopated things with the hi-hat and the snare drum. So we had recorded 50 Ways, and Paul went in to listen to a playback, and Phil Ramone was the producer. And I stayed in the drum booth because we had just started recording, and I knew it wasn't time to go listen to a playback. And what happened was, the chorus fell into place right away. Just slip out the back, you know, that part fell in. But the first part, it was hard to make it interesting. I mean, you know, I approached it just like maybe playing with with a cross stick backbeat, and that was the level, that was a good volume level, cross stick and hi-hat, and the backbeat, but it just didn't do anything for the song. They wanted something more, and you don't know, you really don't know what it is. You're just, you start trying different things. But what I was doing, the fact that I was practicing the syncopated thing on the hi-hat and the snare drum beforehand, Phil Ramone had heard that and asked why I didn't try to incorporate that kind of thing, that kind of syncopation into the verses. And so that's how that came about. It was like a group effort. And that's how it is a lot of times, it's like you use the artist and the producer to bounce ideas off of, and other musicians also. But in this case, it was Phil wanting me to try this thing, and once we started with that approach, with a more syncopated drum thing, then it was, when we tried it, even though it might not have been the exact way we did it, but people started perking up because it started making more sense musically, and at least we knew that we were working in the right direction. So that's the way 50 Ways happened. Late in the evening was, Paul was looking for grooves to write some songs to. So I went in, and we started playing. I just started playing. What I do is I take one idea and use it as many ways as I can. So there's a thing called the Mozambique, the pattern that I play. It's like so one of those, the right hand would be on the cowbell and the left hand would be on the snare drum. And that makes it sound like, that gives it like a Latin kind of thing. And with Late in the Evening, they were just looking for something different that felt good. So I just, I picked up 2 sticks in each hand because I wanted it to sound like more than one player. And, and what I did was play that same sticking, the Mozambique sticking, on the rims of the 2 floor toms. And then occasionally, towards the end of the phrase, going to the tom-tom. So it was like, the tom-toms would be the last part of the bar. But what it was just, so it was that groove with 4 sticks on the rims and the toms. And it was like, pretty much 4 on the foot. But it was on the rims and it was on the toms, and then I would go to the bell of the cymbal for different sections, and then I would go to the cowbell for the breakdowns. But it was all that same kind of sticking, which was a Latin kind of beat, but with the 4 on the floor, and 4 sticks, it made it sound like a whole other thing. And it was just trial and error. You get to a point where I was doing a lot of different sessions, and everybody wanted something, everybody was stretching out to try and get something different. So I was basically, it's at one point hitting everything in sight. But on that song, it was like just the rims and the toms and using that old sticking with 4 on the floor.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great. Next question is from Jamie Weston. And Steve, you've talked a lot about this already. Jamie's got a question for you. He's a jazz studies major. Jamie, are you here?
Hi there.
Hi, Jamie.
My question for you, we kind of talked about this a little bit, is you talked about what you're practicing currently and what you've been over the past couple months being, at home. I was curious if there's any moment in your career where you had like a kind of stricter practice routine on like certain concepts that you're working on daily, and if that ever looked like it. I know you said didn't do it too much while you were touring, but I was wondering maybe before that, or if you had the time to practice, what was it that you were practicing?
Well, when I was in college, I was practicing mostly marimba and timpani. And that's what I needed to spend a lot of time on those instruments. I was working, when I got back to Eastman from Manhattan School of Music, I started working 6 nights a week with Gap Mangione and Tony Levin. So that really covered a lot of what I wanted to do. That kept me connected to the kit. And I really had to, spend time practicing instruments that I wasn't that good at, like timpani and marimba. That took a lot of time, but I was working 6 nights a week, so that was the practice I was doing when I was in college was mostly for percussion, and the kit was I worked when I got back to Rochester. I worked the rest of the time that I was in school, 6 nights a week. So, and then they formed a jazz band in Eastman. So I got a chance to play a kit there. But Eastman was mostly mostly percussion. The jazz thing happened after I was there. They put a jazz program together. At one point it was Chuck Mangione was the head of it, and then it was a guy named Jack End. So that made it so the set of drums was part of the curriculum there in terms of the jazz band. But most of the time practicing was for, percussion for me, because I was way behind in that.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks. Next is Sam Cook. He's a freshman, Steve, from Plano, Texas. Sam?
Yes. Hello, Mr. Gadd.
Hi, Sam. How you doing?
Good. How are you? I just wanted to ask you, in all of your years of like performing, recording, and touring, you have any favorable or memorable groups that you've been a part of? And if so, why?
Well, I love the band Stuff. I was in a band called Stuff, and that was one of the most fun bands I ever played with. Richard T., Cornell Dupree, Eric Gale, and Gordon Edwards. And Chris Parker. There were 2 drummers in that band. So that was one that was a lot of fun. There were, there were tours with Paul Simon that were enjoyable because not only was the music good, but the band was good. Like Tony Levin, Richard T. was in the band, David Sanborn at one point. At one point we toured with Toots Thielman and Hugh McCracken. So that was a great tour. I don't I don't really have a favorite. I look back on a lot of the things, and even though they're different genres, I have great memories and great times and memories of playing great music. Times with Al Jarreau, James Taylor, Eric Clapton. God, I had fun with all of those guys. So not any one sticks out other than the band Stuff, which was one of the bands I was in when I first got to New York. And we did we did some touring. We backed up Joe Cocker. We did a lot of sessions in New York, Van McCoy sessions and Choice 4. So it was a good hang. We had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Okay, we got to Nathan Bjoin, and Nathan's a jazz studies senior from Harlen, Iowa. Nate?
Hello, Mr. Gadd. It's an honor to talk with you this evening. I kind of a two-parter. My first question is, you have a very vast and extensive career that's been very long. Have you had any roadblocks or major periods of frustration in your playing that caused rifts, and how did you overcome those?
Roadblocks with my playing?
Yeah, or like major periods, yeah, frustration where you feel like you're not doing well, you're just kind of like in a rut, creativity's not up to par.
I didn't, I had those feelings, before I got to New York when I was, in school practicing. But once I got to New York and started working, everything seemed to fall into place. The roadblocks were if I thought I was going to get, like at one time they told me I was going to do an album, and then at the last minute they got someone else. So I had to, I was looking forward to it, and it was right at the beginning of my recording career. So it was like, it was a bigger deal than it probably should have been. But what I did was, I was living with Tony Levin and his wife at the time, and they were doing some work in their kitchen. So I got really involved in putting a floor in their kitchen and helped them, get their house that they were renting together, and I got into that, so that when calls started coming in to do work, it was like the calls were interfering with me doing this other job. I had gotten into this thing, and I wanted to see it finished. But it was more so with that kind of stuff other than the playing. But the other thing that happened is the roadblock was, when I had to go to rehab. That wasn't on the agenda, so that's something that had to be dealt with, but it wasn't the playing thing as much as the outside things that seemed to be roadblocks.
Awesome.
So the roadblocks about about playing and if I was gonna, if I should be doing it or not. I had those feelings before I got to New York. You know what I mean? You just gotta, you have up days and down days, and I guess you just gotta, walk through it. You know what I mean? It's all part of it. We play tricks on ourselves, and if we get up in our own head and start listening to the stories, it's, we should never going into our head alone is like walking into a bad neighborhood. You should never go in there alone. You know what I mean? So our minds play tricks on us.
Awesome. And my kind of second part is when you start getting extremely busy and you just have a lot of stuff on your plate, what kind of stuff do you do to unwind?
Well, just, I mean, if I can get, if I'm not, you know, I have dogs. I like to I like to be home with my wife, and we had 5 dogs. We got 4 now. So relaxing with them helps me unwind. I like to, I think exercise is important. At one point I was jogging pretty much every day. Since the pandemic, and I was doing it up until about July. Then it got too hot in Arizona. So, but I think that exercise is very important for it to keep your head clear. I think it's important to eat right. Your diet is important. Taking good care of ourselves physically helps everything sort of flow and makes it easier to unwind when it's time. So it's just trying to keep a good balance of, you know, mental, physical, and spiritual.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Beautiful, Steve. Thank you. We're up to Riley Wines from New Jersey, jazz studies major. Riley, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Riley.
So my question for you is, who are some musicians that you've heard that you haven't yet gotten to play with that you would really like to play with?
You know, I mean, I haven't, I'll tell you, to be honest, I haven't really been listening to a lot of new music. I've been, you know, what I've been listening to are things that I've been working on myself, or stuff that I've got to learn to play when I go back out. I mean, Chris Dave is a guy that's a new guy that I think he's pretty amazing. Mark Giuliani. Do you know Mark?
I don't know him personally.
But you know of him?
Yes.
Yeah, he's great. Those are 2 guys that I know of. I don't know a lot of the other new guys. You know, I've seen some of the young kids on the Zildjian things, and they're playing phenomenal. But you know, it's not like I've been, you know, studying them and I know who they are. I just know that there's a lot of young guys out there that can play, and that are doing some new things. And I just haven't had the opportunity to really spend a lot of time studying it. But I can tell from what I've seen that they're monsters, and that I could learn a lot from these guys.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Okay, and then Logan Scott is a freshman. Logan, you have a question for Steve?
Yes, I do. Good evening, Mr. Gadd. It's an honor to be speaking with you tonight.
Nice to meet you. Nice to talk to you.
My question for you is there any advice you could give to more concert-oriented students who are looking for more drum set experience and maybe wanting to expand their improvisation vocabulary on the kit?
Well, I think that if improvising, it's important to think in phrases. Because I think that when you're improvising, what I want is I want the people that are listening to be able to understand and know where I am, and I want to be able to connect with them. And the way that I feel is the best way to do that is to sort of improvise in phrases. So in ways to do that, I think you can, you know, program a drum machine and play along with that. And, you know, or you could use a click. But, you know, think about doing it in phrases. And, you know, maybe come up with like the first bar, like one. So that's one way where you can play the first bar and then answer yourself. You know, so I think the more ways you can come up to come up with musical ways to play phrases, I think that would help your improvising. Thinking 4 or 8 bar phrases. And you could play 1 bar and answer with 3 other ones, or you could, you know, actually come up with a 4 bar thing that you know, and then, you know, play those 4 bars that you know, and then play 4 bars ad-libbed, and then go back to the one that you know, and then play 4 more ad-libbed, and then write another 4 bars, and then answer yourself. So, but the thing is to, you know, phrases are ways to help you know where you are in your solo, instead of just playing 1 bar at a time. So that's how I would do it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Great advice, Steve. I think we've got time for maybe one more student question. And this one's from Ian Yu. And Ian's a freshman at school this year in jazz studies. Ian, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Mr. Gadd.
Hi.
My question was, how did you come up with your iconic drum sound and the way you tune your drums?
What I did was, at one point, I bought a bunch of different heads and tried different ones on the top and different heads on the bottom. And at the time, it was, they were like Evans hydraulic heads on top, on the toms on top, and clear Remo ambassadors on the bottom, and a coated ambassador snare drum head and a diplomat snare side head, a thin plastic head on the bottom of the snare. You know, I tried other heads, different heads. Those are the ones that ended up feeling the best. The other thing I did was, like, I bought a set of Pearl, the chromatic toms, the 8 of them, they all had, they started with 8, 10, 12, 13, 8, 10, 12, 15, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. They all had top heads. And I put bottom heads on all of them and picked the drums, the sizes that I thought sounded good and had a good tuning range. And what I came up with was 10, 12, 13, and 14. And I had like the Evans hydraulic heads on top and the clear ambassador on the bottom, and they just sounded really good. I found that you could tune little drums down and get them to sound big. And when you tune them up, they responded good. It was easier to take little drums, and they would sound good at a normal tension, and then when you loosened them up, they sounded good. Big drums, when you tighten them up, they don't sound as good. And when you loosen them up, they sound big and fat, but you could get that range with smaller drums. So that's how it started. And, you know, I use different sizes now. I use, I use 12, 13, 15, 14, and 16 now with bottom heads. But, you know, I go through periods where I'll try different heads again just because, you know, I get tired of the same thing, and, you know, I might want to have something different. But that's how I did it. It was trial and error.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great. Well, Steve, actually, there's one more student that did submit a question. It's 8:15. Is it okay to have one more question for you?
Sure.
Okay. Devin Kazmierczak. Devin, are you there?
Yeah, I am. Hi.
Hi, Devin.
Hi. I just want to say it's a really big honor to be in the same chat right now and to ask you this question. I really enjoy a lot of linear styles of playing, and I think you're a pretty big reason for that. So I was just wondering if you could give any advice for, you know, practicing limb independence or linear groupings or phrasings, any books or any specific drummers that.
What do you mean by linear? What is that? How do you mean that?
I guess a good way that I've always thought of it is like we talking earlier, 50 ways to leave your lover was mentioned, and the groove on that. There are some nothing really everything seems independent of each other. Right. I guess interdependent is a better word, I think.
It isn't independent. They all made sense when you played it together. It wasn't.
Right.
So the exercises that I was working on in the book, I think would help some of those things. You know, the other thing is you take one idea and use it as many ways as you can. So it's like if you got 4 beats, you know, you could play. Can you see that? It's playing 1 on the pad, and then there's 1 with the hi-hat and 2 with the bass drum.
Yes, I see.
Okay, so you take. And then displace it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you go. You start at 1, 2, 3, 4. So you take that one idea and do it as many ways as you can, and then do it with your left hand. You know what I mean? It's like, and then, you know, when you move it around to different, you start it on different beats in the bar, that creates an independence. And when you play paradiddles, let me do it over here. So you know the sticking. And then that creates, when you play it feels one way when you play it on one. When you play it when you start it on four, it's the same technical thing, but it feels completely different. So you're creating an independence between your hands and your head. You know what I mean? Because your head knows it the way you started on one, but it has to adjust when you started on 2, 3, and 4. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you learn how to make those displaced things. The more you do it, the more comfortable they are, and then the more readily you're able to use them in improvising. They sort of you learn them and they'll start to become part of your repertoire. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you take one idea and do it as many ways as you can, that's a good way you'll find different things that you'll put into your bag of tricks and other things that don't feel as good. And the more you come up with different things, the more you put into the bag of tricks. And those are the things that you can take out on the spur of the moment. You know what I mean? Because you've got them. And I think that's a good way to improve to get it more linear.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Well, Steve, this time has flown by. I want to just thank you for all of us for your music, your inspiration, your motivation for us as musicians. We've loved, I know I can speak personally, I've loved listening to you play over the years, and just every recording has always just been so amazing. Do you have any last final words for these students that are in the process of figuring out who they are as musicians and how they're developing?
Just, follow your heart and enjoy. It's not about when you get there you'll enjoy it. It's like you got to try enjoying the journey, and just have fun and keep practicing.
Good words. Good words. Yeah, thank you so much for your sharing. You've always been so giving with that, and appreciate your artistry and everything, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks,
Next
guys.
week,
And John Beck, thank you.
Oh, Steve, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And your buddy Jack and I just had a little conversation the other day.
Oh, good.
So he's doing well.
Oh, good. Well, tell him I say hello, and thank Ed So for stopping in.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks, guys. Good to talk to you guys.
Very good. Guys, just want to remind you, next Tuesday will be Louis Conte with us next Tuesday night, and I'll be sending you information about that. So, Steve, have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much again. Good night.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Night.
And Mark, thanks for inviting me.
Oh, John, so great to have you with us, buddy. Yeah, absolutely. Hope to see you soon when all this craziness is over. Yeah. Take care. Good night.